Hello, I'm Dana. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I am back for another reading of my book, 7 Years to Surrender, My Journey to Faith. This is the series where I am reading my book chapter by chapter and talking about it, kind of giving behind the scenes, I guess, if you will, of my life and how it's explained in my book. I released my book back in November 2025, and I thought that was the big thing to put my book out, because my book is just talking about my story. It's real life. I know we like to keep things surface here on the internet, but my book is real, and I am just talking about how I got here, because it still amazes me that I am now talking about things that I never would have imagined I'd be talking about, and just opening myself up to whatever. And I mean, I guess God just trusted me to be obedient to Him, because I didn't always have a relationship of obedience with God. It was just not that type of relationship. But as I cultivated my relationship with Him over the years, I see things so differently. I mean, I thought my relationship before was fine, but as life continued to unfold, it just took on a whole different meaning. And if for whatever reason He trusted me to be obedient with His word, and and He has me out here like this, so I will continue to be obedient, because that's what this relationship calls for. I mean, even when I got married, like, it was almost automatic that I knew I would have to be submissive to my husband, but I never was really taught how to be submissive either. I think it just comes natural. Not that I don't have a voice, and that's what this relationship with God is about. It's about submission, surrender, and being obedient. So here I am, real life in living color. It's just amazing how everything is unfolding. I'm still amazed at just when people do read my book. It's so many people that have mentioned that they started reading it and they finished it the same day or within a short amount of time. And it's 200 pages. So I don't think that's exactly a quick read, but I'm just humbled that I have put out a book that people, they haven't been able to put it down. So, like I said, this is just my stories, and I thought that putting my book out was the big thing. But then when I was led to come on and read my book and put my voice to my words, that just took on a completely different journey. There will be a book at the end, I'm sure. It's already started, but yeah, I'm going to continue to read this one right now, and just see how everything unfolds. So today I am reading two chapters, as they just seem to go together. So, and then I will talk about them both at the end. So I am on chapter 12 today. The last chapter was about Mr. Match Guy, a guy that I started talking to back in 2014. I met him on Match. I had been trying to get out of a situationship before I started talking to him. And that's a whole nother story, a whole nother book, but we won't get into that today. But yeah, Mr. Match Guy, he was a gorgeous man. And this is basically the beginning of that in chapter 11. And then it's a continuation of that journey and things that transpired after that in chapter 12, entitled The Shift. It was the day after the New Year's Eve party in 2015. I hadn't slept much. Goshen didn't seem too upset after I told him my secret. but he was worried. I was about 95% sure he wouldn't contract anything, but I still felt horrible. Deep down, I knew it was over. We got dressed and went to brunch, but it was a blur. After we ate, I went home. Thankfully, I was still off work. I needed time to recover emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. I started working on a hair crochet braiding project to distract myself while I tried to process my life. Goshen said he'd get tested in a few days. I prayed. I made a foolish deal with God. If you let him be clean, I'll remain single forever. Why do we negotiate with God like that? I cried the entire day. We hadn't officially ended anything, but I knew. He'd said something like, I couldn't be in a relationship where I couldn't be intimate in every way. That was enough. The next day, he texted and called me, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready for more heartbreak. Plus, I had made that deal with God. Then he left a voicemail saying that if I didn't pick up, he'd be upset. So I called him back. He wanted to hang out mostly, I think, to ease his anxiety and not to seem like a total douchebag. I wasn't done with my hair yet, but I agreed. He came over and we went to a glass making class just up the street from my apartment. Who knew it was that close? We didn't actually make anything, we just watched. Afterward, we went to the Cincinnati Art Museum, one of my favorite places. He held my hand while we walked around, but I couldn't fully enjoy it. I didn't want to get my hopes up again. We had lunch in the museum restaurant, then went back to my place to watch TV on the couch. A few hours later, he left. I cried some more. We kept texting throughout the week. I returned to work, and a few days later, he texted to say his herpes test came back negative. Thank God I could breathe. I could let it go. From January 1st, 2015, I could feel something shift. It wasn't a specific moment, just this quiet knowing that things were changing. I'd had crossroads before, but this felt different. I needed to find my way back to my joy. Goshen still texted here and there, but he didn't initiate another date. So I focused on something to look forward to, a birthday trip in March. I usually went to Tampa, Florida, which had always been my spot with Redbone, but I wanted a fresh start. A lot of people at work had mentioned Gatlinburg, Tennessee, so I thought, why not? It was only about a 5-hour drive from Cincinnati. I put in my vacation request and started feeling excited again, but also unsettled. Something about this year just felt significant. Goshen kept texting sporadically. Eventually, I told him to stop. It felt like he was just toying with my emotions. Then, the day before I set to leave for my trip, he asked if he could take me out for my birthday. Free birthday dinner? Why not? I was surprised and weirdly touched that he remembered. He knew pizza was my favorite, so we met up at a small place up the street from my apartment. I was in a much better place mentally. When I saw him again, whew, he was still fine. My knees didn't exactly buckle, but they definitely considered it. It was a weeknight, and the place was practically empty. Small with red and white checkered tablecloths and matching curtains. As we waited for our order, he asked about my birthday plans. I told him I was going to Gatlinburg. Who are you going with? Just me. He didn't believe me. He even acted like he might join me, going back and forth about whether he could miss work. We hugged goodbye after dinner and went our separate ways. I wasn't bothered, but still left the door open if he decided to come. The next day I hit the road. It was rainy and gray, not ideal driving weather. Kentucky roads are already tricky with all the hills. I'd never driven past Louisville or Lexington, but I had my trusty GPS. I still had a separate GPS device. Back then, GPS was notorious for getting you lost, but for the most part, it was dependable. I stopped for brunch at Cracker Barrel, which I love, and then got back on the road. But after a few hours, I realized something was off. I still wasn't seeing signs for Gatlinburg. I pulled over. How am I still 2 hours away? Somehow I had gotten completely lost. I retraced my route and eventually made it to Pigeon Forge, the town right before Gatlinburg. But now I was stuck in the worst traffic ever, a vacation traffic nightmare. I was exhausted. By the time I reached my hotel, I still had to find a parking spot in a packed lot, then carry my bags forever to the front desk. From there, getting to my room was another trek. I finally made it to the room, opened the door, and there was a bouquet waiting on the desk from Goshen, and apparently the bellhop guy who had added his name to the note with the flowers. Chapter 13, Reset in the Smokies. My days in Gatlinburg were reflective and peaceful. It was my birthday month, and I was so happy to be away, having new adventures, breathing different air, and pressing the reset button on life. I stayed at the Margaritaville Island Hotel in a large, beautiful room that would have been perfect if only it had carpet. I'm a carpet girl. The hardwood made the space feel cold, and I couldn't quite get comfortable. The balcony was my favorite spot. It overlooked the riverside, and I could hear the water rushing by. The only downside was the couple next to me, smokers. Despite the balconies being smoke free, I didn't bother reporting them. Thankfully, the smell never seeped into my room. Inside, I had a fridge, a microwave, and an awesome looking fireplace. The room was stylish, and despite its chill, I could appreciate how cool it looked. For my birthday, I booked a massage. The outside of the spa wasn't exactly inspiring, and the inside didn't improve much on first impression, but I told myself it's the experience that counts. It didn't help that the massage table felt flimsy, the thin sheet barely covered me, and a fan blew directly on my skin. Cold is not what you want when you're stripped down for relaxation. Then there was the headpiece, a piece of metal pressed into my chin no matter how I adjusted my head. By the time it was over, I knew it was the worst massage I'd ever received, but I refused to let it ruin my trip. One day, I went hiking in the Smoky Mountains, a true highlight. I'd booked a group tour, but it ended up just being me and the guide, Charles. Charles was in his 20s with a peaceful calmness about him. He handed me a walking stick, which I didn't think I'd need, but quickly came to appreciate. We set off at a comfortable pace, stopping here and there while he pointed out plants, animal tracks, and bits of history. Midway, we took a snack break before continuing. The whole hike lasted about 4 hours. It was worth every penny. Even with the thought of bears somewhere out there, I never once felt unsafe. Afterwards, I wandered through shops, bought little things, and ate a lot, though nothing was memorable except for a few warm Krispy Kreme donuts. Even with all the beauty around me, there was a slight unrest beneath the surface. Back in December, I'd found a lump in my left breast that felt sore, and now I was also dealing with a severe outbreak. I pushed it all down and kept smiling. This trip was supposed to be about joy, and I was determined to stay positive. Still, as my trip wound down, I could feel my mind beginning to shift. I was starting to prepare myself for whatever was coming next. So at the end of 2014, like I said, things were shifting. I remember I had had my first mammogram several months before I was 40. And I had gotten a letter a few weeks after my mammogram, but I hadn't read it. And eventually I did read it. It was before Christmas. And it was telling me that I needed to come back for a biopsy. But I didn't really pay attention to it. I like my mind was in different places. I had dated another guy from Match before that, so it was like it was around the holidays too. So I was preparing to go home, and I'm not sure what was going on with the work, but it was always something going on with work. And so I went back home, and I remember talking to my brother and his family. We had went out, it was around Christmas, and somehow the conversation came up, and I was saying that I needed to schedule another appointment, doctor's appointment, for my breast. And the reason why I didn't think anything of it was because breast cancer didn't run in my family. And I had had a lumpectomy back in 2002 before I even moved to Cincinnati. I was in my mid to late 20s, and the lump was benign. And my mom, she had even told me about occasions where she had lumps in her breast and they were benign. And so when I got a letter from my doctor, I was actually a little frustrated because I was thinking, why didn't they have the biopsy or the ultrasound first? Like, if that's less invasive than the mammogram, which is the first one was awful. It's like if they could find it just doing find a lump with an ultrasound, like why wouldn't they do that? But I later realized that it's different. The ultrasound is to target certain areas, not your whole breast. That kind of put me off and made me put off my appointment. I can't remember when I scheduled my appointment. I think it was, oh yeah, I scheduled the biopsy for after my trip to Gatlinburg. But the lump was sore, so that was the strange thing. It was a lot smaller than the lump that I had back in 2002, and it was sore, but my mind was on other things. So met Goshen at the beginning of 2015, and that didn't go anywhere because of the STD. And even to be talking about that now is crazy because who talks about that on social media? I mean, I haven't come across anybody so that's very open about having an STD, but it's in my book and I have to talk about it. So I talked about it several chapters back when I was dating the dentist when I was 19, 20, and he was my first and only sexual partner back then. When I contracted it, I didn't know what it was exactly. And when I talked about it with him, he didn't seem all that concerned about it. And even the fact that he didn't let me know before we were intimate was another thing. And I never quite understood why, but it is what it is. But to have to deal with that in every relationship going forward was a journey in itself because there were times where I myself didn't talk about it, didn't have protected sex. But it was just one of those ugly secrets that people don't talk about. And so, like, to bring it up, it was just always this ick, this thing in the back of my mind that if a relationship got serious, that I would have to bring it up. And so, in this situation with Goshen, not realizing that it was going to escalate that night, like even if we were intimate, I didn't think it would go the way it went. I wasn't sure how much, it was such a blur that night. I really didn't know how much contact he had made, but he must have known. And I don't even know if he knew like all of the details of contracting it either. But he must have felt like uh, he made enough contact that he needed to be tested. And another reason why I said I was 95% sure he hadn't contracted anything because I wasn't having an outbreak then. But just being in that moment and having to decide whether I was going to share my secret or not, or if I was just going to just write it out. Something triggered in me to stop in that moment and tell the truth. And it's like not knowing that that experience was just going to shift my life so dramatically. And like I said, it was already shifting because it was one, I was thinking about the lump and trying to push that down and remain positive and keep my frequency up. But then to have that experience to happen New Year's Eve night going into New Year's Day, it was technically the first day of the year then. And just to feel something in my spirit changing, for me to even feel a push to tell the truth in that moment. And just everything changed from there. Like just feeling sick to my stomach of what was going to come next. I'm sure it was things in the back of my mind going on with my job as well. Like there was different pressures on my job, dealing with the situationship, wanting to end that because that was already on its last leg. It was just this feeling in my stomach in that moment, and just during this whole time period of ending the year and beginning a new year, and what I wanted to happen, just where I saw myself, period. Like there was just something in my spirit that I wasn't even aware of, but I just felt it. So, with all of that going on, I just knew I needed a reset. And I was so thankful to go and spend a few days in Gatlinburg. Like my spirit was still low because I was dealing with an outbreak and it was bad that time. I don't know if that was the worst that I had ever felt it, but having to feel that the whole time and still push through and try to lift my spirits to have a good time, and I did. I think just being out in nature in the mountains was everything. And I know it's almost cliche to be like, talk about being out in nature, but it's everything. And to just experience that, all of it, the ups and downs, the good and the bad. Some good things did come out of it. It was a reset. And it was funny because this is very random, but I had found a lotion and I'm trying to think. Oh, it was a scent in the hotel and it smelled so good that I went up to the Bath and Body Works up the street. It was a little outlet mall. And I think I got some more. No, I don't think they had it. I think that was an outlet and they didn't have that lotion. So I had to wait until I got back home and I found that lotion and I just like fell in love with that lotion. And then they discontinued it several years later, but it was called Rain Kissed Leaves. That was a memory that I still have from that trip. It was just good to just get away. It wasn't my first solo trip. It was really what I needed. And I'm so thankful that I took that trip because that was the beginning of the biggest shift in my life, or at least at that point. And so that's those two chapters, 12 and 13. Let me know in the comments, like, what was a time in your life that you felt your life shifting, and what has been the biggest shifts in your life that you have gone through that have just really changed your life, either for the good or the bad. Let me know if anything in this video or in these chapters have resonated with you. I still don't hear people talking about so openly about STDs, and I know it's not a cute thing to talk about. I wish I would have had someone that I could have talked to about these things, like even before I became sexually active. Being in the church, being a church girl, we weren't supposed to be having sex in the first place. I didn't feel like there was anybody I could actually talk to about this. And even like the guy I was dating, the dentist, it wasn't even like he wanted to talk about it, clearly. But it's really what brought me here. Going through this was a huge part of my journey. Like, it's what catapulted me to now be talking. I don't understand why still that this is a journey that I was put here to talk about. It's all working for my good. I know there's people that want to talk about it that just don't feel like they can talk about it. They don't want to talk about it because it's that ugly secret that you just don't talk about. And for whatever reason, God put the courage in me, He put the boldness in me to share my story. We go through things to help others. So, yeah. So I will leave you there. Just wanted to remind you that my book, 7 Years to Surrender, is available on Barnes & Noble and Etsy and on my website, danaceleste.com. That's DANACELESTE.com. And even if you don't want to talk about it, you can reach out to me privately. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.